Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Ethereal, and I'm the host of the Chameleon System, and today we are doing the first episode of a new series that I have been wanting to start since literally 2020, but stuff happens, quarantine and all. So here we are in 2022, and we are finally going to be starting a series called Good or Bad, DID Rep, very simply named. The basis of this is that I'm going to be reading books or fan fiction or online books, aka fan fiction that isn't fan fiction, it's just fiction that is written on sites like AO3 or Wattpad that have the element of dissociative identity disorder in them, and I'm going to be ranking how good they are so that I can give you guys some book references and other things. So today we are actually going to be starting with a AO3/Wattpad story. You can find it on there, and it is a fan fiction about Jacksepticeye. And we are going to be starting with the chapter 1. It has 6 chapters, and it's called Jack Has DID. And the author of this one actually did ask me to review it, so that's why we're starting with this one. So, Jack Has DID, it has 6 chapters, but there are also some one-shots that I might be reading depending on how long this video goes. So I'm going to be reading, and I'm going to point out interesting things that I've noticed about good or bad rep in the book. Let's begin! So right off in the beginning paragraph of the first chapter, there's this. He tried to ignore the pounding in his ears. He'd had a splitting headache for days, damn near a migraine, but he knew he needed to record a video. This is very common. You can get switching headaches or just headaches from dissociation. That is a good thing to add. A lot of people seem to forget about it when they're writing about it. But you can have very bad headaches from being dissociated or switching, so I like that this was added right off the bat. Right after that, he'd had these headaches frequently, long, dizzying ones that left him exhausted and occasionally deprived of memory of the last few hours. This is, of course, the dissociation element. Depending on what disorder you have, OSDD or DID, there's a varying degree of dissociation and memory loss because of amnesiac barriers between yourself and your alters. So OSDD, if you do not know and you are new here, is otherwise specified dissociative disorder. Okay. The familiarity, however, did not make them any easier to deal with. They still hurt like hell, and no medication had ever worked. This is true. You can't really get medication for DID. There is no way to just stop your alters from fronting. There's no pill that immediately makes you final fuse if that is the goal you're working on. This is very accurate. As the game's opening theme sounded, Jack felt his eyelids grow heavy. A moment later, they closed. This is obviously a written switch. There's a bit of dissociation with that headache earlier, and he's finding it hard to keep his eyes open. That is something that I personally deal with when I'm dissociated. It happened earlier today when I had tried to film this video and it just didn't work out. And this is a switch, and I think the cue in was supposed to be the game's opening theme. He was going to play Happy Wheels, and someone switched in. This one is a great paragraph that I'm going to read. When Jack opened his eyes again, his headache was gone. He felt dizzy, but after a few moments, that too cleared. In front of him on his screen was the menu of Five Nights at Freddy's. He looked around a few times in confusion, then up at his camera. The red light was blinking, but he didn't remember pressing record. Clearing his throat, he clicked play. The title screen appeared. Night 5. He'd never gotten past night 4. Looking up at the camera, he said, "Well, welcome to Five Nights at Freddy's, I guess." He was still incredibly disoriented. This is very common. When you front and you don't know what you're doing, clearly someone was playing a game and they were recording, so he doesn't even know if he's filmed an intro, so he's repeating it. This is something very common, especially if you don't know that you have this disorder, or if you are a new alter in a system that you will not know what you're doing because you do not have good communication with your system. So this is very accurate because, again, he is not seeing a psychiatrist. He doesn't know what's going on, and he's just kind of ignoring the things that are wrong with him. So this is a really good example of that because of all those dissociative barriers. He doesn't remember what they were doing. He was not anywhere close to the front. There's just complete gaps of memories right there. Okay, he has finally decided that he should seek help. So he's going to see that psychiatrist that was mentioned earlier. He didn't remember pulling out of the driveway or driving down the road or even getting onto the highway, but next thing he knew, he was in the right lane, a red light shining up ahead. His eyes grew wide and he slammed his foot on the brakes. When the car finally stopped, it was nearly touching the one in front of him. His heart was pounding. He'd never had a memory cup like this. This is a really common worry for people with DID, that they're going to have a switch while someone is driving. And again, this is something that is thought out between people that actually do drive and have DID. Most alters will know how to drive, and clearly they did. He was just shocked by the switching in again. Another thing that is actually really good is the fact that he was dissociating while driving. A lot of people, even abled people that do not have things like DID or any other dissociative disorders, they will dissociate while driving, and you don't even know it, because generally when you are driving to a place where you know the destination and you know how to get there, you will just automatically switch your brain off, or you'll listen to music or something and kind of zone out. Okay, this is a very long one, so I'm just going to read through it. Jack groaned, clutching his head. He was vaguely aware of a voice speaking nearby. So, Chase, is this your first time out? He rubbed his eyes and opened them, his sight slowly stabilizing. A man in a suit coat was sitting in front of him, clipboard and pen in hand. What? He asked hazily. I asked if this was your first time out, Chase, the man said. Who the fuck is Chase? Jack demanded, Irish accent thick and slurred. He must have really been out of it. The man did not answer, but made a note on his paper and instead asked, What is your name? Jack scoffed slightly. Shouldn't you have it already? We've obviously been talking, he said. The former smiled. Humor me, he said. Jack hesitated. My name is Jack. Who is Chase? He felt exhausted. Why was he so tired? How old are you, Jack? 26, he replied, sitting up straighter. Who is Chase? The man watched him carefully for a minute. Damn it, tell me who he is. Jack slammed his hands on the table, eyes dark. He felt a surge of hatred bubbling up inside of him. After seconds, it passed. He swallowed hard and slowly lowered himself back into his chair. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That wasn't like me. I don't feel like myself. To his surprise, the man smiled. Don't worry, Jack. Your outburst is quite understandable. You must be very confused as to what's going on. Jack was silent for a moment. I've had blackouts for as long as I can remember, he said. My whole life. You know what causes them? The man gave a small nod. Tell me, please. The psychiatrist folded his hands over his clipboard. Have you ever heard of DID? He asked. It's more commonly referred to as multiple personality disorder, though that is an outdated term. So, starting at the beginning, he is seeing the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist throughout the entire thing is acting very similar to how you should act. He is talking with Chase. He's asking important questions, like who's fronting. He's making sure he's keeping in track with that. Jack is also reacting in a way that seems normal. A lot of people, when they are finding out about this disorder, are generally very upset or worried or scared. They don't know what's going on, and it's frightening to just suddenly wake up and someone's calling you by a different name, obviously. And again, there is this slight problem where the doctor does say it's more commonly referred to as multiple personality disorder. That is not true. That has not been true for around 40 years, if I'm guessing correctly. I think it was 1980 to 1990. So, it's been a long time since that's been in any sort of DSM. It's not the correct term. It's not outdated. And here's the next bit right here. Jack gave a slight nervous grin. I mean, in stories, movies, games, shows, he swallowed. You're not saying that's real. Very much so. Quite rare, but there's indisputable proof, the man sighed, and I think you have it. So, Jack has heard of this disorder from movies and other medias, and he is a bit nervous about it. That is somewhat uncommon because it is, for some reason, still slightly unknown. But this was written in, I think, 2019 or so, 2019, 2020. And the indisputable proof part is correct. People can try to argue this, but there has been indisputable proof to DID. People with diabetes have had alters without diabetes fronting, or vice versa. And when running blood tests, there's been no signs of it in alters that don't have it, but there have been signs in alters that do. You can't fake that. You can't just inject yourself with diabetes and then take it out just to prove something to a doctor. So that is very correct. Here's the next bit. This is a very long section because it's a bit of an overload of information to get the story going. I have other reasons for this diagnosis. Like? Jack asked, not completely sure he wanted to know. Well, for one thing, you've been sitting here with me for nearly an hour, and this is the first time I've heard your voice. The Irishman wet his lips. I don't understand. The psychiatrist's voice was exceedingly gentle. I was speaking to someone else. His name is Chase. Jack swallowed a lump in his throat. I don't understand, he repeated. What exactly is DID? It's a mental disorder, the doctor said. A crude term, perhaps. It is when a child experiences such traumatic events that they cannot live a normal life with the memories of said events. But I do live a normal life, Jack interjected. I'm fine. So this is, again, another thing that can happen with the disorder. There is a lot of amnesia, and there are alters that are called trauma holders that will hold memories of trauma so that the host can be completely unaware that they have ever had anything bad happen to them in their childhood, like going on with Jack here. And again, the voices can change. They're different. And it's been an hour with talking with Chase, so that is correct too. And this is the explanation for that. The man held up a hand to silence him. In order for the child to continue to survive, the brain will split itself. It separates the memories from the child, and in doing so, creates an entirely new personality or alter. These alters, the ones that preserve the child from the memories, are referred to as trauma holders. The other personalities may split off if needed for a multitude of reasons. These alters can be radically different. They have different levels of intelligence, different backgrounds, different ages, genders, nationalities. They are essentially entirely different people. This is completely true. It's perfect. Like I said, the trauma holding and the breaking up of a child's personality before it can fully form is completely how it works. And again, he doesn't have those memories because he just cannot handle them at this point. So obviously he might have a gatekeeper, or again, the trauma holders are just far away. The entire description of how there are different types of alters with different intelligence, ages, that's all correct, and it's very well written. And another thing it does mention is the alters. If you do not know, alters is a shortened term for alternate state. Sorry, I got distracted. You are the core, the original, if you will. Chase followed. He is your primary protector. So a primary protector is the main protector, obviously, going with the word primary. A core is what is believed to be the first person. Now, this is argued on because some people say that there is no core, there's just the host, which is the alter that fronts the most, or some people say there is a core. We personally have a core. We are not saying that every system has to have a core because obviously everyone is very different. Our core has not been a host for a long time, but we know that she's around. We take care of her because we assume she is core because myself and Evan do remember a time where we three were the only ones around. So we have that, but other than that, there is some people just don't know, and some people just don't have it, and they know that, and they just have a host, and that's perfectly valid. There's many different types of systems. Here's more information. To protect the core, hang on, I lost my place. The brain creates amnesiac walls and separates the alters from each other. You've never known Chase because technically you weren't supposed to. So yeah, that's true. That's what I've been saying about the amnesiac barriers between the brain and the other alters. This is another really good part. The next step I would suggest is trying to communicate with Chase and the others. Your memory loss is getting worse because they're fronting, taking control of the body. The more you talk with them, the easier it will become to control this and to avoid dangerous memory gaps like the ones you suffered here. Again, it's hard sometimes to control. You can control switches better and more healthily when you do have better communication. So it's not saying just shove your alters back in a corner. It's saying just make sure you're not switching in a dangerous situation where you need to be fronting, like if you were driving in a situation like that. And again, communication is always key. And then here, Chase told me of 2 other alters in the system. So primary protector knows a little bit, but he might not know everything because that is more of a role for the gatekeeper. And Chance didn't get to say when. So that was the first chapter. Well, let's move on to the second. He was surprised to find a paper on the counter. His name was on it. Frowning, he slowly picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was unfamiliar. It read, Jack, this must be so weird for you. I can't say it feels normal myself. Believe me, if I could find a different way to meet you, I would. But this will have to do. I heard the doc wants us to communicate. For the most part, I'm an open book. Questions? Chase Brody. So this is the first attempt at communication. It's actually done by a different alter and not the host. It's done by the primary protector, as said. So possibly before, he did not know he was a system. But they did go to that psychiatrist. So this isn't a bad thing. There's explanation for this. It's the psychiatrist might have told him. And again, he told them that they should work on communication. So this is all going as planned. All right, this is later in the story, and the note has been moved. That would explain the takeout bag next to it, because he had a memory lapse for most of the afternoon. More eager than the first time to see the response. Jack, it's good to see you weren't scared off by the note. I was a little worried it would be too forward. A little about myself, huh? The doc said I'm what I... See, so the doctor is telling him. The doc said I'm what's called a primary protector. I guess that's kind of what it sounds like. I've been watching over you since you were little. I've tried my best to keep a low profile. That was always the point, you know? So that you could be safe and have a good life. I guess I haven't been doing such a good job of late. Anyways, I'm 26, just like you. I'm from Vermont. Is it weird to know I'm an American? I think it's interesting you're Irish. I can't even do an Irish accent, and we have the same mouth. This is, again, true. Most alters can have accents. We obviously have alters with accents, and they will differ from the bodies, and they might not even be able to do the host's accent unless they are an ANP, an apparently normal part, which just means that they can pretend to be the host better than other alters. They can do their voice. They know how to act like them more. So that's what an ANP is. So we've changed position a bit just because I felt like the audio might be a bit better this way. I don't know. The audio has always been bad. I don't have a good system yet because this is just on my computer. I'm working with what I have. Anyway, one more thing. The doctor said we could learn to actually speak to each other for real. I'm not sure how it works, but he said if we practice, you'd be able to hear me in your head. Kind of creepy if I'm being honest, but I'm willing to try. So again, this is something that is common if you specifically have more communication within a system, is that you will be able to hear other alters, and if you have really good communication, you'll just consistently hear them, and you can kind of hear each other's thoughts. It's a really weird thing because you're all sharing one brain, so like what else are you going to hear? Nearly a week after the second note, they'd made no progress. Well, not with speaking to Chase directly anyway, but he had learned an amazing amount more about the rest of the alters in his system, as Chase called it. Chase. So yeah, it's called a system. That's what it's called. According to the American man, Jack currently had two other alters. Their names were Jameson Jackson, a Brit, and Henrik von Schneepelstein, a German. Jack thought the latter was quite a name, but Chase had assured him he would answer to the shorter Dr. Schneep. So yeah, Chase knows about some of the other alters. This is pretty common. You know, they have been kind of working from the sidelines. Again, all systems are different in the way that they choose to do things. And these ones, they've all decided to just kind of hang back and not talk to Jack during his childhood. Their choice. And here is the first moment of clear communication from the primary protector in the story. After pulling out the small stack of envelopes from the mailbox and shuffling through them, he froze. His entire body felt tense and still. He felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety, maybe even fear. The feeling grew and grew, swelling up inside of him until he could hardly think. Jack, move! He instinctively lunged into his yard, hitting the ground hard as the voice echoed horribly in his ears. A moment later, there was a deafening crash sounded behind him. Turning, he saw a car had crashed into his mailbox, which now lay flattened and broken on the ground. Jack. The voice was still there, clear as if the owner was standing right in front of him. The American owner. Chase? He breathed, stumbling to his feet. So they've talked to each other in this moment. It makes sense because obviously as primary protector, he's going to try and stop Jack from getting hit by a car. So this was pretty standard part of the course for communication. Generally, if you are starting communication with alters, it might be a caretaker or a primary protector in a situation where there's a lot of stress or anxiety or a dangerous situation where they'd be able to talk to you because they would be closer to the front because of said thing. Here's another role. I saved all of us, he replied. It's sort of my job, right? But I can't take all of the credit. Schneep actually alerted me. I was closest to fronting. I could warn you. Jack tilted his head. How did the doc know? He's your physical protector. So this is another term. This is specifically like if you just want to use this for your system because there are a lot of roles that some systems choose not to use. So physical protector, we don't have one of those. We just have the primary protector and other sorts of protectors. But what I'm assuming from it is physical body, physical harm, such as a car crash. Here's another one. They're back at the psychiatrist's office. Do you know the names of your other alters? Jameson Jackson and Henrik von Jack took a breath and tried again. Schneepelstein, he said finally. Interesting. Jack ran his hand through his hair. They are pretty crazy names, huh? He had a slight headache. Dr. Jeffrey smiled. Indeed. I was referring, however, to Chase being present right now. Jack frowned. How do you know? You said Henrik's last name in an American accent. Well, at least the last time. It seems Chase aided your pronunciation. This is something that can happen. Generally, when you're very blurry or Kokon, you will kind of fluctuate between different accents. It happens all the time with me and Iva and me and Evan. It's just something that is a very common occurrence because you're both there and you're both trying to speak at the same time. How can you do that and not front? It's called being co-con, the doctor said, meaning co-conscious or co-control, two alters sharing the body, if you will. So that is, again, accurate, as I just said. Jack's headache was growing. Fuck, do you have an aspirin? It's a switch, Jack. Someone wants to front, most likely Chase. May I speak with him? I don't. Just relax, Jack. The American's voice sounded gently, and Jack said, You'll be affected more if you fight it. I don't really want to front, but if you let me, I'll handle it from here. So this switch, Chase doesn't really want to front. It's just kind of happening. And fighting a switch can give you a headache. You know, you have to, you got to stay focused. You got to stay grounded. And it's a bit tiring to do. I've been doing it this entire time if you haven't been able to tell. Oh my god, this is so cool. Okay. When he woke up, he was back in his house. He blinked a few times and got up off of his couch, looking around. He didn't remember making it home, but Chase had fronted. He must have driven back. He headed to his room and soon found himself hopelessly lost. Why did he feel like there were so many more rooms than usual? He was convinced he'd seen at least 3 more bathrooms on his walk than he had in his entire house. He felt oddly scared, apprehensive like there was something eerie nearby. It was just the feeling he got when he was about to be jump scared in a horror game. His body began to shake. He fell back against the wall, slowly sinking down and burying his face in his hands. So he's in his inner world right now. And an inner world it's like a world or a house or something inside the head that you can go to. Not every system has to have one. Not every system has one or is able to reach it. You might have alters that can't access an inner world, so you're just kind of in a void state. My ex-partner system, now the pencil system, not the chaos system, their host can't access the inner world. The only time that they were about to, they got hit in the head and they weren't able to. They kind of just went back into that void state. Again, I also want to say this about inner worlds. It is kind of common to feel a bit of fear towards it, because I do know that some people are a bit scared of their inner worlds, so this is totally accurate. Not to us. Our inner world has always been a bit of a safe space, but I can understand where it's coming from. Hello? What are you doing on the floor? Tired, Ja? The feeling vanished. Jack raised his head to see a man standing in front of him, looking down at him in concern. He swallowed hard. No, just had a sort of feeling. Never mind, he asked. Who are you? I'm sorry, this is how it's written. I could ask Z the same as you. I have never seen you here before. He had a thick German accent. Jack hesitated. Dr. Schneep? He asked. The man looked taken aback. How did you know my name? Only Chase, he broke off, nodding, a slight smile on his face. You are Jack. I did not recognize you at first. Forgive me. The doctor rubbed his chin, thinking for a minute. It is where we live when we are not fronting, if that makes sense. I believe Chase calls it Z Inner World. It has become my home entirely, as I do not front very often at all. So, again, inner world stuff. He's like, why am I here? And the doctor is kind of explaining that this is where you go when you are not fronting. And also, Schneep does not front often. That's perfectly valid. You can have alters that basically never front. The only thing that you have, that's necessary is an alter should be able to front. That's what kind of differentiates them from a NPC alter. What am I saying? Just an NPC, not alter. If your inner world has that sort of thing, most inner worlds don't. But I'm sorry, I'm really dissociated and I'm finding it hard to find correct words, but he doesn't front often, that's valid. Some alters will barely ever front, but all alters have the capability to front, some just don't. And here is when they're describing what a physical protector is. Chase said you are my physical protector. What is that exactly? I keep you from harm, the doctor replied, giving a small shrug. Different kinds of pain, ja? Danger, physical, mental, emotional. The second two I am not so good with, but physically safe, that I can do. So that's what a physical protector is, basically. That's all you need to know. Chase told me of your gratitude, but it is just my job. No thanks required. Besides, it is not the first time I have helped you. So, yeah, alters, sometimes it's a bit weird that you're constantly thanking them for everything, but alters really they save your life on many occasions. I can think of so many where I would not be here today if it weren't for my altars. And it's so much gratitude, but also it's like really strange sometimes to think back on the fact that my job is really to keep this person from getting in a dangerous situation. My job is literally to be a child. My job is to hold trauma for this person. And now we're on chapter 3, and I think we're actually going to stop there because this is getting very long. So we're going to divide this by 2. So there's going to be about 3 before we move on to the one-shots. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all soon. Bye, guys.